Welcome to Be Now for Tuesday, January the 10th. My name is Don McLeod, and as usual, I am joined by my sidekick, Fazel Khan. Faz, how you
I'm
doing
not a
today?
sidekick, Don. I'm not a
Oh,
sidekick.
you're not a sidekick today?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm half the screen.
Co-host. Do we call it co-host?
Is it? That's nice.
All right,
I'll take that.
co-host. All
So are
right,
you
good.
better, Don? Last week you were really sick. Not as sick as me. I'm still sick.
You still got, yeah. No, I was like, you know what? Sometimes it's just hanging in there, but no, I'm a lot better than I was a week and a half ago. I did get tested. I didn't have COVID, but I had the flu. So it was one of those bad flu things. I don't know. Maybe it's morphing from COVID to a flu, whatever.
Did you get your flu shot, Don?
I'm still alive. How's that?
Okay. All right. So on our agenda today,
right.
we have a couple small little items. One, we're going to talk about outdoor rinks.
Yep.
And what's going on with the weather. And then we're going to talk about a new bike helmet that's been all over social media. So we'll quickly talk about that. And then we're going to talk about empowering women. We have as our guest today, Councillor Rowena Santos. So she's going to be joining us to talk about that because her and Councillor Brar passed a motion in December to empower women within the city of Brampton, the corporation, the organization, not across the city. So we'll talk to her about that in a few minutes.
Okay,
so
good enough.
The first topic, Don, is outdoor rinks and climate change.
Yeah, outdoor rinks. Basically, I know the mayor, what was it, late December, basically the outdoor back rink program was reintroduced. Last year they had it where, there was a contest. They went from January 1st to the 31st, and you could build your outdoor rink. And Cassie Campbell, I think, and who was the other NHL person that's coming this year?
Darcy Tucker.
Darcy Tucker will go to your backyard, spend an hour there in the backyard rink or community rink that you decide to build. While the weather hasn't been too great, it hasn't been sort of cold enough over the last thing. I'm just wondering maybe the city is going to expand that, increase the deadline maybe sometime into February because it's been pretty mild. They have the backyard rink program, and then they have a couple of backyard or rinks that are being set up in parks. Dugan Park is one, and Peel Village. So we'll have more on that. But we talked about the rinks. I don't know why they don't have the rinks, just leave them there, instead of breaking down the boards, because I know a lot of kids in the summertime, we used to play ball hockey, and you have inline roller hockey. So I don't know what if there's a possibility to just leave those rinks year round in those parks or where they're set up, and then you could have it for ball hockey.
Yeah, and this is, I think, a fairly new project, right? I think the outdoor rink that Councillor Keenan passed in Peel Village, it's got a refrigerated unit with it, and I think it seemed like there was a rush to get it out this winter. So maybe in future winters, to me, it's like, put down a concrete pad and then you can, continue to use it in the summer, right? If you want to play ball hockey.
Yeah, because a lot of kids right now, I see them, they're playing in tennis courts, right? The tennis courts are being used. I mean, there's a couple of schools that I passed by along Bramley Road, and they have the basketball courts, and they're not being used, and they use them for ball hockey. I see them playing ball hockey right into the winter. So yeah. If you got a rink and the boards are up and you've got the netting, I don't know why you just leave it there, because nothing.
Yeah, and I really think these facilities have to be kind of multi-season, because I heard that Centennial Park in Etobicoke, they were doing for years skiing, right? It's a small little hill.
Yeah.
And they have ski rental, but it was costing the city of Toronto way too much. This year was supposed to be the last year, but because of the weather, they've already canceled it, right? It's already mid-January and you've been unable to ski. So they've completely canceled skiing on Centennial Hill. I think they're going to replace it with a toboggan hill if the snow ever shows up. So, if you want to some clear evidence that climate change is here, you just got to look at the fact that, there's no snow outside right now.
Well, don't forget, we have Chinguacousy Park. Now, the ski hill at Chinguacousy Park is not open either because there hasn't been enough snow. And the temperatures haven't been low enough where you can't even make the snow, right? Because that's where the snow blowing machines come in.
And that's why for these outdoor rinks, having these refrigerated units are good, because from my understanding, they can work till like 5-6 degrees, which, by the way, reminds me, Don, you and I had an argument about Gage Park.
Yeah.
I saw people skating on that the other day, and I was wondering how they were doing that. You were saying that's not refrigerated, and I'm thinking, how could there be ice there if it's 1 degree outside?
Because it was 4 degrees. As long as the ice is down, the ice will last as if it's frozen. That Gage Park is not. They don't have any kind of freezer or cooling under that Gage Park.
Okay. Well, I don't believe you, Don. Because it was warm for a good 3
I
or 4
don't care
days.
if you believe me or not. I'm just telling you,
Somebody
they don't have
out
it in
there,
Gage Park.
tell
They
me,
have it
is
at
Gage-
Duggan Park, the outdoor rink at Duggan Park that we're gonna, I know the mayor is going to be promoting. That does have a chiller onto it, but there's no chiller on Gage Park. Okay. But anyway, multi-use because of the thing. I think it's a good idea. I mean, the Chinguacousy Park, that ski hill in the summertime. I think they use it for bike. I think people can bike down there, like the mountain bikes and stuff like that. So that would be another venue, another multi-use venue that you could be using on that, right?
And the same thing applies. I know at Century Gardens, there's going to be a new cage soccer facility that's inspired by Thibaut Hutchinson. I'm curious what's going to happen to that in the wintertime, right? Because that should be usable as well in the wintertime.
Yeah, and it's not hard. Once those boards are up, I mean, you can play ball hockey, and you can play inline roller hockey as well, right? So there's different things, and so let's see what the city comes up with. But multi-use facilities, I think, are the way to go. Having one thing for one sport. They brought that up during cricket.
As well. Multi-season as well. Multi-use and multi-season.
Yeah, because they brought that up for the cricket stadium. They were saying, well, if we're going to build this cricket field or cricket pitch, as they call it, can we use it for other things going forward, whether it be soccer, and so on and so forth, which is a good idea because, it's not like you can't transition a field from cricket to soccer, right?
All right, moving on to our next topic, Don.
Yes.
The new bike helmet. Have you seen this on social media?
Yeah,
I know you have. You told me to put this on the agenda today.
It was Tina Singh, I think, is the mother of 2 boys, I think, and she decided to, design a bike helmet for her young Sikh sons, and that's what she came up with. It looks like a pretty good design. To me, that's something that she didn't take a helmet and then refurbish it. It looks like it's almost like a plastic mold that she already got done. Well, it's pretty cool.
And you and I know that plastic molds, injection molds, are not inexpensive to develop. Plus all the testing that goes with those helmets, right?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to make sure that you have a mold that's properly fitted, and also you've got the inside padding, which has got to be customized as well. You can buy that padding, by the way, for hockey helmets and stuff like that. It glues into the helmet. So obviously she knew someone, or that's got a mold manufacturing or design, and it's good for her. What is it? Necessity is the mother of invention. So she decided to take things into her own hands and do that. Hopefully, if she decides, I mean, she might want to put a patent on that. It's going to cost a bit of money to put a patent on, but might be a good idea.
Okay, and our final topic for today is with Councillor Santos. But before we introduce her, I put a clip together with some comments that I think you call it whatever you do at council when you're advocating for a motion. She spoke to the motion. So both Councillor Santos and Councillor Brar. And so this clip is about 2 minutes, and then when we come back, we'll talk about it, and then we'll have Councillor Santos on. So
all righty.
Now, Councillor Brar and I are sitting here. We are not the status quo at this table. We are not stereotype at this table. And the challenge for us is that when you're not the status quo and you challenge the status quo and people want to maintain the status quo, the change makers become the target to be silenced. And so I think it's important for me to share that because at the City of Brampton, we don't have enough women at leadership tables. And often the excuse and reason I get back, particularly from the male voices that I ask, is that we don't have enough women in the pipeline. Women represent more than 50% of the population in Brampton, and we are very much underrepresented at the leadership table. And so if we don't have enough women in the pipeline, then we need to build the pipeline. Without a question, research shows, and I don't need to tell anyone in this room, you could look at other countries, you could look at corporate boardrooms, you could look at Harvard Business Review articles, and it explicitly says time and time again, When you have women at the leadership table, your policies are far more effective and your businesses run far more effectively. That's just a fact.
Overcoming these barriers and obstacles that are not heard of. They're not voiced, but making sure that we have a space, women have a space. We have mentorship programs for women to empower one another to do better. I think that's very important. Again, I want to thank our council members for always giving us a space to speak and have that space where we can talk about these issues openly, and they have supported us ever since. So again, thank you, Councillor Santos, for that. This is something that we needed, and so happy to be the second woman on council with Councillor Santos. And definitely let's go and get these things done. Thank you so much.
So what does it say, Don, that we only have 2 women on council out of 11 potential
Well,
seats?
the opportunity is there for any woman to run in the election. So, you know, something like that, it's up to the electorate who decides to get, you know, put in those seats. Let's see what Rowan has to talk about the motion.
Okay, and as before we introduce Councillor Santos, we're bringing back the Sizzler segment.
Ooh,
and
sizzler segment, eh?
And
Ooh.
so we are either going to sizzle her or she's going to sizzle. Let's see.
Ooh, nice.
Welcome,
All
Councillor
right,
Santos.
welcome, Councillor Santos.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Fats. It's good to be back on the Sizzler.
Okay. So what is your motion exactly? Because all I know is that it talked about, you know, empowering women and, you know, giving them a safe space and mentoring. What is your motion?
Well, over the past couple of terms now, this being now my second term, I have noticed, as I said in my speech at the council table and ongoingly in this new term of council, that around the council table, when I look to my right, when I look in front of me, really it's all men that I see, with the exception, of course, of now Councillor Navjeet Brar, who I absolutely adore and I'm so happy to have her at the table. And it's problematic because women's voices, representing 50% of the population in Brampton, are just not well represented. And if Brampton is going to continue to advocate for a more diverse, inclusive, representative community at the table, leadership tables, then we have to look at that pathetic statistic that really only 2 members of council are women. And when you look at the leadership table, it's all men. And so the excuses that I get a lot from, especially from male voices, as I said, is that there aren't enough women in the pipeline. There either aren't enough women who are applying or there aren't enough women who are qualified. And I'm a solutions-oriented person. And so my solution at the table with Councillor Brar is let's build that pipeline. And we're going to start today. So the motion is about empowering and supporting women, first and foremost, within our own corporation at the City of Brampton, because we want to see it run better and more effectively. And then also, hopefully, that's a lead by example approach where the rest of the community will see that. It is so important for the community, for women, young women, other women, to see women like myself, Navjeet, and others at the leadership table.
All right, so let's cover 2 things, because you said there's one from the point of view of the electorate. You're sitting there and you take a look at your council seat. There's only 2 women. Well, let's take a look at that separately from the men that you take a look at in the leadership position. That's the electorate decides. Any woman can run in any election frame. That's not something that the city can dictate and say, well, more women have to run. That's up to whoever wants to run and decides to run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know the issue is not isolated to just the City of Brampton. When I'm a board member of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, which represents over 2,000 municipalities across the entire country. I was recently at a board meeting in early December where I presented on a panel the perspective of a woman who was essentially targeted disproportionately online throughout the campaign. And in that room full of men and women, it was shared that, in fact, across the country, women representation in government, Canada is number 62 in the world. Number 62 in the world, There are South American countries that are even higher ranking than we are. And so the issue of elected officials specifically not having enough representation of women, unfortunately, is something across the entire country that we need to address. And I think part of it is incredibly systemic. Like I said in the speech at council, when folks want to maintain the status quo, they try to silence the change makers. Women, when we sit at the table, by our nature, sitting at the table, we are change makers. It has only been recently, over the past little while, that women actually have been given the right to vote. And we've made some progress here and there, but until we actually reach that leadership table, many of those policies that are important to having effective government, such as childcare, gender-based violence, or even simple things like Kana, one of the people that I've mentored, making sure that menstrual products are free for women to use, because we shouldn't have to pay for those such things. Those policies aren't necessarily going to be as effective without voices of women at the table.
Okay, you mentioned women at the table, but at the same time, we had, let's see, Linda Jeffrey was the previous mayor. Susan Fennell was the previous mayor before that for 2 terms. Hazel McCallion, you have Bonnie, they've been ruling that, Mississauga fiefdom for quite some time. You have a new mayor in Caledon, which is a woman.
Mm-hmm.
So, you do have barriers broken down through the electorate. How is City Hall going to actually incorporate this motion to what? Break down what barriers for more women to run? They can run. There's no barrier for a woman to, pay the $100 and run an election, whether it be mayor or city council.
And I love the fact you brought up all of those mayors, because it's important to actually point out that people like myself and Councillor Brar are standing on the shoulders of women like Susan Fennell, Linda Jeffrey, Hazel McCallion, Bonnie Crombie. These are trailblazers who have made it to high-ranking elected office. But look, if you look at the statistic, we're still in a decline. With the level, there are statistics out there that show, Dawn, women, when they run for elected office or are in elected office, they are 4 times more likely to experience toxicity as well as negative online attacks relative to men. And what I've seen in my personal experience talking to colleagues across the country, many women are actually now no longer deciding to run for re-election. And it is harder for people like Bonnie and others to continue seeking re-election simply because they are women. What will change things is if more women get elected. And to your point about the actual electorate themselves, I think women in these roles also have a responsibility to persevere and keep going, simply because it is our responsibility to continue pushing and continue trailblazing so that it is easier for future generations to run and get elected at the table. The more that people see women at the table, the more it becomes normalized. Right now, unconscious bias shows that it's not normalized.
So let's take a look at.
So one of the reasons we put this topic on the show today was because The Guardian put out an article. I guess they interviewed you, Councillor. And if you look at the comments on the first comment on Twitter and the first comment on Facebook on this article, it was your typical man saying, "Oh, women are emotional," or let's we need the best person for the job. Those are the comments coming out of men.
Yeah, and to your point, Rowena, you're going to get those. So you're going to get idiots across the board. But to your point, when you first got elected, we did sit down with you. We talked about the challenges that women face when they do get elected. Like I know that Carla Bailey was at that. We did it through Brampton Focus. We talked about some of the problems that you encounter at the door and so on and so forth. These are something that has to be broken down over time. I agree, it's something, but let's take a minute and then just like you were talking about toxic comments. Well, some of those toxic comments were coming from women as well, from Brampton as well. So it's not only men that have toxic comments. There are women that basically take a look at another woman as as a situation where it's even more toxic, right? I mean, you've seen that. We know who we're talking about here. So We don't have to
And
bring it up. But
yeah, and that's such an interesting point, because I've thought about that as well, right? And that, Don, is another signal that the idea of women in leadership positions is not normalized. So when women criticize other women, for some reason it's seen as women bringing other women down. But when men criticize other men who are running for the same seat, there's no comment. It's normal. You know what I mean? And
no,
so, like,
I understand completely, because you're fighting an uphill battle. But let's take a look at internally. You talked about the internal pipeline that doesn't seem to be working. Like, doesn't have the city already have an equity in place? And I know last council, you brought it forward. I think I'm not sure if it was you, but someone was talking about bringing a motion forward to make sure that women have more opportunities to apply for the city of Brampton and work in the city of Brampton. I mean, doesn't the city already have a policy, an equity policy?
yeah, absolutely, there is. But you can have a policy, and as we know, even if there is a policy, if there's no one who is holding the corporation or people or leadership to account, it doesn't mean that that policy is necessarily going to be followed. And one of the things that I've experienced, just even in my own professional career, is that sometimes if you speak up and say, hey, this policy says this, why is it that this is being overlooked? Why am I being overlooked when I should be given an equitable chance at a promotion? Sometimes women fear that if they speak up, they might lose their job. And those are some of the real barriers that prevent, similar to, me speaking up, standing up for myself on Twitter. I fear regularly that if I do that, I'm just going to be attacked and bombarded with negative, toxic attacks. And so I remain silent on Twitter. Same thing within the workplace. If you don't feel like, if you feel like your job is threatened if you speak up, well, you're probably not going to speak up. And so the purpose of the motion was to show and signal internally to the women in the organization that both Councillor Brar and I see them, and that we are going to help and provide leadership to establish mentorship and support programs like a Toastmasters program for women to help with public speaking, like, I don't know, maybe a self-defense workshop for women at city staff and city hall, things like that now create a safer space and allow women to support other women.
So you're going to hold self-defense courses in the city of Brampton. Is this going to take place like before or after council meetings? This is what I would like it to take it during council meetings, because that would be great. Right?
I do my own self-defense routines in debates, verbally during debates at council meetings. But certainly I think we have a lot of partners like Cupid Sting and various martial arts studios who are run by amazing women entrepreneurs around the downtown core. And I think partnering with them and helping women at the city of Brampton with their physical, mental well-being will also help with their confidence as well.
So did you want to comment quickly, Faz?
Well, I want to thank the counselor. I know, she knows I'm a big fan. I have 2 young daughters, and they've both experienced at university, not so much at school, but at university, things that should not happen. And it's just because of their gender.
Yeah.
My oldest daughter didn't even tell me about it until after she was talking to her mom about it, because it's just a situation she's never had to deal with. And I didn't even know what to do. What am I supposed to do? You feel so helpless. And so, I try to be an ally, and I think we all need to be allies, Don. So I defended I was there on the Brampton Guardian, how we love the Brampton Guardian. I was there commenting to their commenters, saying, asking them questions. When you say women are emotional, so my question is, what do you mean? Right? I want to call these people out, because if we don't do it, it's just going to continue.
Well, you're going to find people like that on every level, Faz. That's the problem with trolls. And
right, but in this issue, right, you're dealing
before, just like Rowena has encountered trolls. I mean, we know the trolls, and we've encountered them.
Right, and you need people going after the trolls to tell them it's not right. You're dealing with 50% of the population. You have the arrogance to think that you can just say whatever you want to say.
Well, sometimes it's best to ignore them and just make sure that going success. I mean, we're talking about the pipeline. for positions that you look at, Rowena, and you're talking about like, where's the pipeline? Are we talking about, is the talent pool there, right? I mean, if you're looking for, let's say, Bill Boyes, the chief, decides to retire, are you looking down the road at someone who's, bringing outside someone to balance that with a totally different gender? I think the chief of fire in Mississauga is a woman, is she not?
Yeah, Darren Rizzi. Yeah, she's a woman as well, and I'm sure that if you had her on the show, she can share with you the challenges of what it was like to get to that position. And I can certainly say it was probably very different experience for her than any other male fire chief across the whole entire country, because that culture is probably even worse than what it is in the political landscape. But to Faz's point about your daughters, both Councillor Brar and I have spoken about this before. I feel personally a big responsibility sitting in this seat, one of only 2 women on council. When I sit there and I'm speaking, I think of your daughters. I think of my nieces, and I think to myself, Mayor Fennell, Linda Jeffrey, Jean Augustine, they were there before me and Councillor Brar and made things a little bit easier for us. And so now Councillor Brar and I are sitting there, and now it's our responsibility to create a path that's a little bit easier for your daughters. And unfortunately, our recent history shows that fewer women are running for those leadership roles, which is why this motion is so important, especially internally within the organization.
Well, there's a lot of talented women. I mean, you brought up, adding women to the boardroom and everything else changes things. I mean, someone would argue against someone like Margaret Thatcher. Or Eva Peron. So you can bring a whole host of other women. Not all women are perfect. You know that, Rowena?
Oh, of course, but not all men are perfect either.
Oh, what?
You're pretty close, Don. You're pretty close.
Thank you. My wife tells me that all the time. All right, so I do know that there's intelligent.
No,
women
you tell your wife that all the time, Don.
Yeah, well, that too. Okay, but I do know there's intelligent women out there that could take advantage of this situation. So the motion is set. When is the motion being voted on, and what's the next step beyond that?
Well, the motion was already voted on and supported unanimously by all of our councillor colleagues. So thank you very much to our male allies, and all male allies like you, Faz, who I know ongoingly supports and
she mentioned me, Don.
Yeah. Nobody cares.
Don, you too. And then the next
nobody cares.
Councillor Brar and I are actually meeting with our equity office with my incredible team of women as well to set up what the next steps are going to be. And we're going to have our first inaugural meeting with all women who are interested in joining to kind of plan out what mentorship and support means to them in the city.
Good. So you know what? Like, we have dealt with women at City Hall in positions of whether they're the top or the bottom or whatever. But there's a lot of talented people that are at City Hall doing work. We have, like I said, Faz and I over the years have encountered them, and there's a lot of good talented people out there. So
especially Don in the police. We have noticed, because obviously we did a lot of work with the police, that the female officers just bring a completely different perspective to policing that's much needed.
Heather Cannon. Heather Cannon is one that we've dealt with for years and years. She's a great she's a great sort of face of the Peel Police. She does a good job, and she's it's like we've dealt with her when we were doing the neighborhood watch. So yeah, she's
I know that we're running out of time, but you bring up a really interesting thing about the perspective of women often, and this just literally happened to me and Councillor Brar on the 6th floor today after a team meeting where we talked about women in politics. And both Councillor Brar and I were in the hallway, and Councillor Vicente was with a man in the hallway and said, Councillor Santos, I'd like to introduce you to this gentleman. And he introduced me to the gentleman, and the gentleman didn't really take me very seriously. You could tell from the body language. And I said, well, I'm Councillor Santos, and I work together with Councillor Vicente. I'm his councillor partner. and it wasn't until I said I'm Councillor Vicente's partner in wards 1 and 5 that he actually started to pay attention. And then Councillor Brar came up and another man came up and completely ignored me and Councillor Brar and just shook Paul's hand. And then I said, and then he left. And I was like, excuse me, I'm Councillor Santos. It's nice to meet you. And then he turned around and said, oh, and I said, this is Councillor Brar. And they were talking about a healthcare issue, which is why I stopped him. And I said, Councillor Brar worked at Osler Health as a nurse during COVID. She might actually have some very important advice for you and some feedback for you. And then only then did he stop and start to pay attention. So sometimes I find myself having to interrupt and intentionally introduce and provide credibility as to who I am and who Councillor Brar is relative to our male colleagues.
Well, I never have that problem, Rowena. No, we know. We talked about it before. Like I said, when you were first elected, we sat down and talked to you about the challenges. If anyone wants to see that interview, it's on Brampton Focus, and it's illuminating some of the stuff that you had to go through, along with, I forget who we were interviewing at the same time, but it was someone else who was running as well. So women running in politics, we all know that it's not an easy thing. Carla Bailey, she actually is now trustee for Ward 7 and 8. She did the interview and she ran the last time and won. So she understands and she can tell you stories as well. So it's a totally different thing, but good on you for the motion. Let's see how it goes going forward. And if you want to come back and talk about it as well with Councillor Brar, we'd be more than happy to have you guys back on.
I always love coming back to Be Now. You should invent a new segment for Councillor Santos.
We should, because you know what? We have an open invitation to all the councillors, and basically
the
you
Santos sizzle, because I think Don tried to sizzle you, but you did not succumb to it. You actually sizzled and shined.
Well, I could have said a few things, but I didn't.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate the time. Thanks again.
Thank you very much for joining us. And there you go, Susan Joseph. Adding a women a much needed flavor to any hall. Perfect. All right. Well, that's it for Tuesday, January 10th. We will see you next week. Faz, thank you again for co-hosting.
Thanks for going overtime again, Don. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Okay.
See you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.